The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Sonnen. Beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever again!
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine right, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo!
I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
And I have my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni.
Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
They hate my guts. The only reason they haven't killed me is they don't want to underline, they don't want to highlight, they don't want to put an exclamation point behind all my work. Doing that would only build me up and only make my work stronger.
So I'm joined by Frank the Clown, the legendary superfan for the WWE. So if you've ever seen the guy in the front row on all the pay-per-views or TV, he's the guy literally dressed up as a clown. And when I first saw this guy, I was like, man, what is this guy's gimmick? He just shows up as a clown. And but everybody knows him at WWE. He's like a celebrity that's a fan. The other fans come up to him and ask for pictures and stuff. So I got a hold of this guy. I missed him out in Mania last week. But what's going on, Frank?
Nothing much. I'm just there's always that Mania withdrawal week after you get home, and I sound kind of sick probably because of all the climate change and everything coming from California back to Chicago. But I'm hanging in there, so I'm doing well.
Yeah, we missed each other. Like I was saying, I was out at Mania too, and I had an incredible time. I was telling Jerry Briscoe at WWE, I've been to all the big UFCs. I've seen Manny Pacquiao fight. I've seen Floyd Mayweather fight. And I've never been to an event quite like WrestleMania, at least in a stadium. When I was a real young guy, I went to WrestleMania 10 at Madison Square Garden, and it was great. But, looking out into a crowd of 75,000 people with all the pyros, and nobody puts on a better live show than WrestleMania. No,
absolutely. The thing is about WrestleMania, it's grown so much over the years. Even WrestleMania 22 that was my first WrestleMania, so I've been to 10 in a row now. That was in Chicago, and that was the last small stadium show they did with 20,000 people. And every year it truly does grow. And so many of my casual fans, I wouldn't even call them that, just so many of my friends that have no interest in wrestling text me and they're like, we're at WrestleMania tonight. They don't know anything that's going on, really. But, they always text me after the show. And especially this one, they were like, holy shit, that was so awesome. Like, Ronda Rousey was on and, The Rock and, Brock Lesnar is such a badass. And that I love that, where the fans that really don't know anything about it, really get involved in it and really get entertained by it, because really there's just enough for somebody that's been to tons of WWE shows and tons of sporting events. WrestleMania just takes the cake by far.
This was my first WrestleMania to see at a stadium. And I had read, in some of the newsletters, like Brian Alvarez's newsletter or Dave Meltzer, that the sound was a little different. It almost sounded like the crowd was a little dead at times. And I've even heard like Triple H would say when he walked out, he would tell the younger guys, if it's silent, don't take it like they're not reacting. It takes a while for the noise to get to you. So to me, the stadium spectacle was pretty cool, but it was kind of quiet. I don't know if you noticed the difference between the stadium noise and the noise you'd hear in a regular basketball or hockey arena.
Yeah, definitely. Especially during the Taker and Bray match. I think the match itself was okay. It wasn't a 5-star classic by any means, but it was an okay match. It was exactly what I expected out of the two of them. But the crowd was definitely quieter during that match. I felt like it sounded almost silent, but it is just because the venue's so big in the open air stadium that the sound's not traveling very well versus an event like the one I always go back to is Punk and Cena at Money in the Bank 2011. That was in Chicago. That's my favorite match of all time. That's my favorite show of all time, and I was there for that. And that was the loudest crowd I've ever been a part of. And it's the Allstate Arena in Chicago is a smaller stadium. It seats about 16 to 18,000, but the acoustics in there are awesome. And that crowd was so like passionate all together that it sounded like maybe like 80,000 people, but it's just because that sound gets trapped inside the smaller venue. So yeah, it definitely sounded like that. And I've heard that same comparison before, like that same statement before where Triple H told the guys, like, don't worry about it. Because then when you watch it back, I don't know if you watched it back yet, it sounds a little bit better than when you were actually there live when it was going on.
Yeah, and another match that it seemed really quiet inside the stadium was Orton and Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
And I came away, that was kind of a lackluster match. But then, I saw some of the reviews and people were like, yeah, that was a really good match. And then I watched it on the network when I got home, and it sounded good. The fans were into it, and I was like, wow. I mean, when I saw it, I was like, wow, that was kind of underwhelming.
Yeah, it was again one of the matches I kind of it was exactly what I expected. That finish was incredible. That RKO, I mean, just absolutely perfect, spot on execution. But again, those fans, like when I was sitting there, I was actually thinking the same exact thing. I'm like, oh man, it's Seth's first Mania, singles match. I'm like, I was hoping he'd kind of get a better reaction. And Orton too. Orton's lost his last couple WrestleMania matches, and he was like one of the hottest things going into Mania this year. And when he came out, I was like, oh man, like another like kind of lackluster reaction. But for the finish, for that RKO, the crowd went nuts. And I think the crowd mics, especially for the people sitting ringside, the mics pick up those people more than they pick up the people in the back. So as long as those people are reacting, it sounds much better. But again, like you said, when I went back and watched it, I was like, oh yeah, that was like a solid 15-minute match. Both guys delivered. Both guys hit everything they needed to hit. And again, the finish was one of the coolest RKOs I've seen in a while. It's awesome how Randy continues to find new ways to do the RKO every single time. So they both, and obviously Seth later in the night, we'll get to that. But yeah, both guys put on a really, really solid match.
Yeah, and you talk about the Allstate Arena. I mean, maybe next to Madison Square Garden, I don't think there's a better place to see a WWE event. I mean, I've seen the video over and over of Punk's entrance in Money in the Bank 2011. It was by far the loudest pop. I mean, probably better than anything Stone Cold did in his prime. It was quite amazing.
Yeah, and I was front row for that, and Punk was always my guy from day one to now. And to see, and at the time, nobody really knew what was going on. That was like the beauty of that match. Nobody had any clue what Punk resigned or what was going on with the title. So that entrance, and Chicago was one of the first cities to boo John Cena back at WrestleMania 22 when he faced Triple H. There was all kinds of there was "fuck you Cena" chants and "you suck Cena" and everything. And then it kind of became cool to boo John Cena, and that kind of grew over the years. But that Money in the Bank match when Punk came out, I mean, I always try to put it in words to people, but it was legitimately like 18,000 people. Every single one of those people were chanting for Punk, and when that music hits, the roar of that crowd, it was louder than the music, which is you never see anymore. And the chants all the way from him, showing up on the stage and walking to the ring, and almost people that don't get wrestling, it made me feel almost emotional, because that was like the culmination of his career up until that point in his hometown, in front of the family and friends, against the number one guy in the company in one of the most anticipated matches of this decade. It was like that perfect storm in wrestling, because like when wrestling's great, it's fucking awesome. And that was one of those times where everything just came together just right. Perfect night, perfect city. And it was executed to perfection.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who say I hadn't watched wrestling in years, and I saw the infamous pipe bomb from Las Vegas, and it got me back into it. And then, of course, the angle culminated with the Money in the Bank, what they call it, the Summer of Punk.
Summer of Punk 2011. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it got a lot of people back into it. But, just to go back a little bit, how did you get it? Because I have to answer this question a million times,
right.
In MMA circles, like, who are you? And it's always the same boring explanation. So I got to ask you, because probably the people listening might not have any idea. So what was your entry into this, and how did you become really well known amongst the WWE fans?
Yeah, it's always a super difficult question to answer for people who don't already know a little bit about it. So I'll try to break it down. I mean, I've been a wrestling fan since I was a kid, since I was like 6 years old. Like, I grew up on Hogan and WCW and all that stuff. So I've already had ties to wrestling from when I was a little kid. I got hooked on it while I was watching every Monday ever since then to this day. But for the clown stuff, I had a buddy that I went to high school with. He's nicknamed Dubs, and it was WrestleMania 24, and we were eating at some rinky-dink fucking Long John Silver's or some shit. And we had this, we wanted to go to a Raw in Chicago and just do something to stand out, just to be funny, because we just like to pop ourselves. And he was listing off all these weird ideas, and then completely joking, he was like, let's dress as clowns. And I was like, genius, we'll do it. Like, one-time deal. We'll get home, we'll buy the costumes. It'll be hilarious. Everybody will think it's ridiculous. Let's do it. We get home from the show, WrestleMania 24. First line of business, we got home, went on the websites and bought these just gaudy-ass clown costumes and, like, paid too much money for them. Got, like, these ridiculous plastic shoes, gloves, little fucking hats, like these, like, costumes with, like, these little furry balls on them, and, like, they were just totally just outlandish. So we decided upon going to a SmackDown ECW taping. It was in 2008 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We bought front row for the show, put on our costumes, went there, and it was a hit. All the wrestlers loved it. They thought it was hilarious. All the fans in the crowd were, laughing their ass off the whole show. And, like, we were super rowdy back then. So, like, we're giving middle fingers and swearing like crazy, and, like, that doesn't fly as much at WWE shows anymore. It's not like UFC events.
Sure.
And, but yeah, I mean, one of the first reaction we ever got was out of Punk, and he climbed a turnbuckle, scanned the crowd, looked over, stopped at us, tilted his head, laughed, and gave us this weird look, and went on, and we were going nuts. So then we're like, okay, let's do it a couple more times. It's funny. So we went to a couple shows in Chicago, St. Louis, Indy, around, like, the Midwest, and then I kind of grew with it, and he kind of faded out of it. He, like, grew up and matured a bit, and I just still remained a child.
He burned out, huh?
Yeah, he burned out, and he lost the passion. So then I kind of just kept going with it, and then I started to expand my horizons a little bit and started traveling around more to the West Coast, East Coast. I met a lot of people on the road that I became friends with, that I then started to travel with. And just through that, like, I'd always try to get the best seats possible. And, like, I met so many people, like, within the company and fans, that it just kind of, it was just networking. You know how it is. And, like, you just develop these relationships with people. And before you know it, now it's like fucking 2015. It's like 7 years later, which is insane. And it's now my 10th Mania in a row. And, like, I've been to all the big shows. Like, if they're, like, for the most part, I've been to all the big 4 pay-per-views for, like, the past 6-7 years. I've been to the Money in the Banks, the SummerSlams, the Rumbles, and I've met, humble bragging, I've met pretty much everyone there is to meet at this point, and I've gotten access to things I probably wouldn't have had access to before before all this started. So as ridiculous as, like, putting on face paint and a wig is, I've kind of made it my own thing, and it's opened up a lot of doors for me. I've gotten a lot of opportunities from it, and no regrets at all. It's, like I said, it's completely ridiculous, but without this clown stuff, like, I would not have lived this crazy awesome life that I've been living currently.
Yeah, that story, it sounds a little bit almost like mine, except the clown outfit.
Yeah.
I never went with the gimmick that far, but I guess my gimmick would be, some of the news before it becomes public or
Right.
common knowledge. But yeah, you're right. You go to enough of these, and people see you enough times, and then typically networking, like you said, and then they come to trust you. They know you're not going to pull some stunt on them and get them in trouble in one way or another. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I've had opportunities to sit down, and just talk with guys that I looked up to for years, that I thought was the coolest thing. And if I would have said 5 or 6 years later, I'd be sitting in a suite at the Scott Trade Center at the NCAA's, just bullshitting with Dan Henderson and Chael Sonnen, and I'd be like, oh, how,
Right.
So it's kind of the same thing, and I guess at the core of it is just being a fan,
Yep.
and my passion for MMA actually started from pro wrestling. I've loved pro wrestling since I think the first one I ever watched. I'm in my early 30s, so I watched when Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson was supposed to be on Saturday night's main event, and then at the last moment they had to put Buster Douglas in there, because he just knocked out Tyson. So
Yeah.
this is 1990, I think, and it was I think it was when the Mega Powers were exploding.
Yep.
Hogan and I think you're a little younger than me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of came up during what the mid to late 90s?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I was in high school during that period, and it was just a great time because even the kids at high school, that weren't really wrestling fans, on Tuesday morning you were talking about Nitro or Raw.
Mm-hmm. Every time. Yeah.
And you wouldn't even be talking about the Monday Night Football game. It was like that was okay, there's some guys that were hardcore, because I grew up in New Jersey, so Giants or Jets. But it was usually, what happened on Raw, what happened on Nitro, and it was just an incredible time to be a fan.
Yeah, there was no better time. And the same thing, like I would go to school. People were, I feel like around here it was more WCW fans than WWE. And I was definitely straight WCW back then. Like, I'd flip during the commercials for the most part, but I was WCW first. And, like, those first guys that appealed to me were Hogan, Hall, and Nash in the NWO because they were just badasses. And there was never anything on TV like that before where people were questioning whether or not it was real. And I was hooked from day one. I think it was like one of those spring break nitros they used to do at, like, Panama City Beach, where it was right after the NWO was formed. It might have been the night after. And it was when Hogan, Hall, and Nash were just like beating up everybody backstage, and Nash was like throwing Rey Mysterio into a trailer, and like the people in like neighboring houses were calling the police because they thought it was real. And that was my earliest memory that I remembered. I was like watching with my dad, and I was like, oh my God, like as a kid, I didn't know what was real and what wasn't, but I was like, this is awesome, this is great. And it just, like you said, you just get hooked from something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I knew that, hey, because this was like when there was a lot of information first being put on the internet. So, I knew, Hall and Nash, it was all an angle because, they were free agents and they did the infamous curtain call at Madison Square Garden. I knew, but then still I was like, oh, maybe there's an element of shoot here. Maybe this is not all bullshit. When they would just come out of the crowd and start, and then I guess a couple weeks later, Nash showed up and then jackknifed Eric Bischoff.
Yeah, and that's when wrestling is beautiful is when they just get you to question something, whether or not that's real, whether it's a work or a shoot, where they suspend your belief for just, even if it's for a couple minutes, and you forget that you're watching a scripted television show. That's when wrestling's the best, and that's when it traces all back to even like the Summer of Punk. For the pipe bomb in Vegas, a lot of people really didn't know whether or not he was legitimately airing his gripes on national television, that he was out the door and he just wanted to get it all off his chest. So that, that blew up like wildfire on the internet and social media. And obviously we're in a different time with social media and stuff now, but it's the same idea where times where you're not sure whether or not what you're seeing is real or it's not are the best times, because that's what wrestling's supposed to do.
Yeah, just to interject something that hit the news yesterday about CM Punk's wife, AJ Lee, from what WWE called it, a retirement.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about that? I mean, my first reaction was, oh, maybe she's pregnant. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about it. I really didn't. There was always rumors about AJ for months and months and months after Punk left, especially. But AJ was always super passionate about the business. Like, she grew up a huge fan. Like, there's like clips of her meeting Lita when she was like 13 years old, like bawling her eyes out. So like, she's been a lifelong fan. She wanted to be a wrestler from day one, and she really paved the way. I mean, she was the first diva that was like that different mold, where she was like that real smaller petite girl that got over because of the way she talked and the way she wrestled and everything. Because like Lita and stuff, a lot of those divas back then, they didn't get a lot of mic time, but AJ got a good amount of mic time, and there's a lot of Punk in her too from like 2012 and on. So yeah, and the interesting thing is that she won at Mania. She got Nikki Bella to tap out. Normally, like, WWE loves to, I guess, bury people on their way out. So, like, you're putting so and so over. That's like the tradition. If you're on your way out, you put the next person over to build them up and take your spot. But either they were leaving on good terms with her, or they didn't know, and then she wrestled on Raw, and then boom, like, yesterday the news came out. So yeah, that kind of caught me by surprise. But like you said, they said retiring from in-ring competition. I don't know if they're setting up for something else, but I think it was a long time coming from everything I've heard, but I just didn't know it was going to be official this soon after Mania.
What's so weird to me is them, not making her put somebody over on her way out. I mean, the only one that I can remember of late was Trish Stratus got to go out, on top, right?
Yeah.
She put Lita in the sharpshooter in Toronto, maybe like 06 or 07, something like that. I mean, I don't, maybe it was like a little bit of a peace offering. Like, if WWE knew about it, was it a peace offering to say, hey, we're gonna do this for you, and can we just get past all this bitterness with your husband? I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, it could have definitely been that. And the thing is with Vince, not so much Triple H, I don't think, but Vince, if he can make money with you, he'll make money with you, no matter what you've done to him in the past, no matter if you've wronged him, taken him to court, slandered him in the media. Look at Hogan, Brett,
How about Bruno Sammartino?
Oh yeah, of course, and Bruno. Bruno was one of the biggest ones. These guys were either burying Vince or whatever for years, 15, 20 years. And sure enough, if Vince thinks you can make money, he'll get you back somehow. Warrior is another one. And it could have been one of those things where, okay, AJ, we know you're leaving. We respect that. You're going on your own terms. We'll give you this victory at Mania. We'll treat you right. And then, I'm sure the door's open. And the thing is with Punk too, and I know Punk a little bit pretty well from over the years. If the door is always open, no matter what it is, the door is open. And if, time does kind of heal all wounds for the most part, no matter how bad it seems now, that door with Vince especially, like, it's maybe not Triple H, because Triple H tends to be a little bit more stubborn about stuff, and sure, and yeah, he's going to get the company for himself, whenever the unfortunate day Vince passes, which may never happen because he could potentially be immortal. Yeah, it's just one of those things where at the end of the day, Vince knows who the stars are and who makes them the money, and there's just no reason why anybody would turn away money. So, I mean, AJ's young. She's only, I think, 28. So there's plenty. I mean, she can come back in fucking 8 years if she wanted to and still be able to compete probably at a really high level. So, let her, if she wants to go and have a family, if they want to go have a family together, that's awesome. Like, awesome for them. They get to do it on their terms. And then if they want to revisit both of them or one of them, if they want to revisit WWE, the door is going to be open.
There's a pretty prevalent conspiracy amongst MMA people, like even people like really on the inside, that CM Punk will never fight in the octagon.
Huh, yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and I tend to dismiss it because I talk quite a bit with Ben Askren, who is Punk's teammate at Rufus Sport up in Milwaukee. And Ben's a straight shooter, man. He's like, well, he's never told me that, and the way he's working out in the room never lends me to believe that this is a publicity stunt, and he'll never give it a try. And I think even if it means Punk going in there and getting his ass kicked, which is quite possible, I think he's just going to do it just because he's just kind of a hard-headed guy, and if he's going to get his ass kicked, he's going to get his ass kicked, and I don't think that's going to affect his pro wrestling gimmick.
No, not at all. And the thing is, so before the UFC news broke, I saw Punk. I mean, I still talk to Punk, here and there. And we actually had the same birthday. It was October 26th. So we made it a plan to go and meet up at a Blackhawks game. So this was when he was still silent. The podcast wasn't out yet. And when I saw him, he was in great shape. And I wasn't expecting him to be like in bad shape or anything, but I knew something was up. And I didn't ask. I just waited. And I heard rumblings about it. And yes, I knew he was in great shape. And then, the news comes out, and I believe you were the first one to kind of get it out there because they were going to announce it at that press conference. I remember that. Yeah. And then that fell through. And so whatever. So fast forward, the news breaks, and now he's traveling 5 days a week, driving up to Milwaukee. It's a 90-minute drive with a little traffic. So he's driving up to Milwaukee every Monday through Friday, going to multiple classes, putting in the work, getting his ass kicked. He just did the shoot the puck at the Blackhawks game on Monday, and he's got a big black eye, and but he looks awesome. And the thing is about him, he's always been that guy that really truly wants to be the best in the world at what he does. It wasn't just a catchphrase. He really wants to be that. So when he puts his mind to something, like he's putting his mind to this, he wants to be the best, and he doesn't want to go out there and get his ass kicked on pay-per-view. And then with that, it makes WWE look like less of a legitimate sport if he goes out there and gets just knocked out in 45 seconds. So I think he's got something to prove to himself. He's got something to prove for all the boys that he left in the back that, hey, these guys can come over from WWE, and we're not just actors. We're legitimate tough guys that if you put us in an octagon, we can hopefully, do well and succeed. So whatever he does, and knowing the guy, whatever he puts his mind to, he usually succeeds in. So I think he'll do all right. I'm not saying he's going to be a world champion by any means, and I don't think he'll fight that many fights to even get to that point. But I definitely think he's going to fight, and I've heard, and I'm probably sure you've heard the same thing, October, November, December, sometime then. Hope if he's on the schedule, he continues on.
Well, a couple months ago, I was up in Milwaukee, and I got to spend some time with his coach, Duke Rufus. And if Duke has it his way, he wants him in the gym for 1 year. Yep. So this was back in January. So he wants him in the gym till 2016 before he'll say, you're ready to go. And, he's going to fight somebody. He can't fight a UFC veteran. It's got to be somebody who's 1-0 or 1-1 or something like that. So they're going to have to sign somebody for him to fight. So, so their experience level matches up. So I don't know. UFC could give him a call and say, hey, we need you sooner. Because the UFC, it's not like they're on the brink of bankruptcy, but they have some moving parts as far as debt swaps and, refinancing some of their loans. And some of the terms of these deals have to do with how their pay-per-views are performing. So I don't know. They might say, "Hey, we need you. We need you fourth quarter. It can't wait until 2016." Which maybe at that point he says, "All right, I'll go do it now." But Duke wants him there till at least a year in the gym, and I think Punk is on board with that philosophy too.
Yeah, and it's perfectly understandable for Duke because Punk is representing him. And Punk walked in as a clean slate, no bad habits, no experience really, besides some jiu-jitsu training. But as a mixed martial artist, he had no experience. So it's Duke's project where it really is going to reflect on, what kind of coach Duke is and the team over there at Rufus. And they don't want him to go in there especially and then embarrass them. And so a year seems fair with somebody with no training at all. But again, like you said, like Uncle Dana and Lorenzo might come a call in September or October and be like, look, we got to get a big number here on this, on this upcoming card. Could we get you on there as, the co-main event or whatever? And that show is going to get buys. It's going to get buys just because people are curious, and it's going to get a lot of wrestling fan buys. Just like when Brock came over, those numbers were huge. And Punk's a big star. Like, there's no denying he's a big star. And a lot of people are going to buy to either see him kick ass, or a lot of people are going to buy, a lot of like the MMA, pessimist about Punk are going to buy to see him get his ass kicked. And that's fine, because Dana doesn't care. Lorenzo doesn't care. The company doesn't care. So, I hope that when he gets in there, that it's not hot-shotted and that he is 100% ready. I'd hate to see him go in there and then, lose, and then in an interview a couple months later say, I wish I would have had a couple more months in the gym, but so-and-so. I want him to see him go in there 100% confident, 100% certain of his skills, and, hope for the best and put on a good show, which I think he will.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win for him because no one is really expecting that much from him. And, the people, if he gets his ass kicked, come on, he's 36 years old.
Yeah.
He has never cut weight in his life. He's never a wrestler. He might have taken some Kempo classes when he was in high school or something. So the expectation levels are very low for him. And that's why I think it was a brilliant move, because he's going to make a ton of money. And even if he kind of, gets his ass kicked, it's not a big deal. Whereas when Brock came over, if he came over and was a complete failure, there's a lot of egg on his face because he is a legit tough guy.
Yep.
NCAA national champion and NCAA national runner-up to the guy Stephen Neal, who 5 months later won the world championships in freestyle wrestling. So Lesnar had a lot of pressure on his back to say, not only representing WWE, but representing amateur wrestling. And, he had a great career. He had a lot of deficiencies, especially, getting hit in the face. But, in the end, you got to give the guy credit for someone who just, woke up when he was 28 or 29 and said, now I'm going to fight.
Yeah, and Lesnar sacrificed a lot to go to the UFC. He left WWE, he went to the NFL. That didn't work out so much. So he left a lot of money on the table in other ventures. And then, like you said, he went there. He was a world champion, NCAA champion, and when looking at Lesnar, he's just a freak. You expected him to go in and kick ass. With Punk, he doesn't look great. He's not jacked, or he's in good shape. He's got the thing is, he'll have a leg up on with some of the fighters is that his cardio is great, just some working matches. Will he go into the third round in a fight? Who knows? But he knows what it takes to really dig and get that extra energy. And another thing is, he's comfortable in front of big crowds. A lot of guys, if they sign somebody that's only had a couple of professional fights in their career, they might be a little nervous walking into a venue, it's in Vegas or something that's 15, 20,000 people. The nerves might strike. That wouldn't affect Punk. And, selling the fight on the way there, that's a huge part of fight week, and is just all the promotion and everything. Punk knows how to deal with that. So, the thing is, he's going to walk out of this a bigger star no matter what. No matter what happens, he's a bigger star, and he's going to make money. He's going to make six figures for the fight, I'm sure. There's really, like you said, there's no lose. It's a win-win situation, just because if he loses, you know what? Punk tried, and we respect that, and that's great. And, if you want to fight again, give it another go. And you know what? Again, as much as he says it, and a lot of people say it, that door to WWE is potentially always open, and he can do what Brock did. Brock was a bigger star once he left UFC. He comes to WWE, and look at now, he's been the best he's ever been. He's selling pay-per-views. People are going wild for him. Punk was already that guy when he left. He was already debatably the biggest star, at least in the older audience's eyes. So if he leaves and does the UFC stuff and comes back after all the controversy, I mean, that'd be one of the biggest moments in professional wrestling history.
Yeah, I think what he needs to do is get in the ring, or getting in the octagon rather, January or February of next year, and then get himself, then do the fight, win or lose, and then get on the WrestleMania in Dallas card, because they're going to need all the hands on deck for them to sell 100,000 tickets in Dallas. And there's a lot of matches. I mean, can Punk get Stone Cold out of retirement?
Yeah, that's the match that they would want to do ideally in Dallas, being in Texas with Stone Cold. And Stone Cold's always said, if I'm doing one match, it's against Punk. And I know Punk, that's his dream match. So, I mean, it's one of those things where if Vince McMahon, let's say Punk fights, let's say he loses, and then Vince McMahon calls up in January and calls Punk and says, okay, we want to do something with Austin. Austin's on board. We want to do this match. We want to have you around for a year. You can work a Brock schedule, no house shows, limited dates, limited appearances. We're offering you anywhere from $3 to $5 million for the year. How do you say no? When you're 37 years old, how do you say no to that money, which you're never going to make again in your life? And maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but that would be a tough sell to say no. And again, I know Punk, and I know he's stubborn, and I respect that. He wants to stick to his guns. But when all this transpires with the fights and everything, and even Mania next year, it would be such a big. And now that it seems like UFC and WWE maybe have some sort of handshake agreement on maybe doing some cross promotion, which is fucking a long time coming. It would be a huge. I mean, that would be the biggest selling WrestleMania of all time, just on that match alone. Not even all the other rumor matches. That would just blow the roof off the place. Yeah,
and just to get back to WrestleMania 31, just to go through the matches real quick. Now, the finish that I love the finish with Seth Rollins cashing in at the end of Lesnar and Roman Reigns. Now, I was reading Dave Meltzer's newsletter, and he says that Rollins only got the word that this was going to happen just before the Rock and Ronda segment took place.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That is that's vintage Vince McMahon right there.
So he also says that Michael Hayes took Lesnar, Paul Heyman, Seth Rollins,
and Roman.
Yeah, and Roman's all in a room, and they did a new finish, and how they were going to work the new finish, and this is all like when did the Ronda Rock? What did that start? Like 6:30 local time?
Yeah, that sounds right, because I felt like that segment ran longer because they were trying to wait for it to get dark for Taker. So yeah, I want to say the show started at 4 that local time. So yeah, it's 6:30 sounds right.
Yeah. So then the Lesnar, because I was concerned that the Lesnar Reigns match was going to run over, which is not really a big deal with the network, but they still have pay-per-view clearance. So they were in a rush, because I don't think, because I was looking at the clock, I was saying to Chill, hey, are they going to have enough time? Because I think the bell rang at like 7:41 local, and they had to be off at 8. And,
8,
yeah. I mean, for a world championship, you'd think they'd give them a lot more than 19 minutes, because you want to get that shot of them after the match, celebrating with the belt. And
yeah, I guess I didn't realize how late that match started, because I think Meltzer even wrote that match was supposed to get like 35 minutes with entrances and aftermath, and it got cut down big time. The match was only like 15, 16 minutes long.
16, which, 8 minutes in, I was just like, all right, the story's been told. If Lesnar's just going to pin this guy, pin him right now, because he's getting killed. I mean, I know it's a work, but shit. Lesnar was just, the German suplex after German suplex. And I know Rollins was at the after party, and I think he was just kind of quiet to himself with his family. But I was like, wow, he must be sore.
Yeah. I saw him there too, and he wasn't doing much movement. He was kind of sitting down at the table with his family, just hanging out. But I mean, the story was interesting because I fully expected that match to be like evenly matched the whole time. Like they wanted to make Roman look like a legitimate threat to Brock, like on the same level. And then Brock's just beating the hell out of him for like, the first 10 minutes. And and the thing was, I gained a lot of respect for Roman out of that match because like he sold it really well. He was laughing after some of the suplexes, and he would try to get his comeback, and Brock would just shut it down right away. And then when the finish was coming, where Brock hit his head on the steel post, and for people that have been putting online, he did not blade himself. Like he was legitimately cut open immediately, and that's just Brock being Brock. Like I'm sure he wanted to bleed, and he took that bump hard. And then when Roman started doing the Superman punches all around the ring, I'm like, oh, here we go. I see what they were doing now. But yeah, I wasn't expecting Rollins at all. I don't know if you were, but I wasn't expecting it because they've never done it before, and they've never done it during a match. So when that music hit, I was going wild. Like I was losing my mind. It was awesome.
Yeah, I didn't expect it either. I thought what they were building towards was Heyman turning on Lesnar.
Yeah.
I guess that was too obvious, though.
Yeah, a lot of people are speculating that, and like it would have made. I mean, it would have been a cool way to go, especially with Brock maybe disappearing for a couple months again, and then because the crowd's rejecting Roman, so in that case, turn him, and then you get real heat on him. But I mean that would have been an awesome route. But I think the main thing is that they didn't want Brock to lose, but they didn't want Roman to win, so they kind of booked themselves in a corner that way. And then they had no choice maybe but to put Rollins in. But it all worked out because now there's more stories to tell because now you've got Rollins versus Orton. You got Rollins versus Reigns still down the road. You got Rollins versus Lesnar down the road. And if you want to do it, you could do a Lesnar-Reigns rematch, not at a Mania, but at maybe another pay-per-view, like a SummerSlam or something. So it opened the doors for more matches. And now the title is on Raw every week. You got Cena and Bryan as the US and IC champions. So, I mean, there's so many... Now they've opened the doors for more stories to be told with their bigger stars. And now Rollins has got that spotlight, which he absolutely deserves after everything he's done. And, it's going to be a fun summer, hopefully, with, all these different routes they can go with stuff.
Yeah, and I was also reading in Meltzer's newsletter that Roman Reigns' family was like, when that finish happened, they were visibly upset. So
I saw that.
I don't think they were smartened up about it.
No, I saw that because I was sitting right on the ramp. I was ringside on the ramp, and Sika, Roman's father from the Wild Samoans, and a lot of Roman's family were front row, kind of like the opposite, like facing me. And I it was crazy. Like he was so into the match, which is fine because it's your son and you don't know the outcome. But I mean, I remember when Roman got tossed to the floor. Like he was screaming at him. He's like, "Get up, like screaming." And then when the finish happened, yeah, I mean, Meltzer said like, yeah, they looked like they wanted to start a war. Like I saw it, like they were ready to start like a Samoan war, like in the middle of the ring, and they were just screaming and swearing, like shaking their heads, and they were so bummed out. And it's like, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He should know better than anyone. Like, it's a work. It's a part of a story. Like, yeah, maybe you thought your son was going to win the title tonight, and yeah, it seemed that way for a long time, but it's a business. There's no need to want to jump the rail and go after Lesnar or go after Rollins. I mean, come on.
Were there cameras on Reigns' family, or?
I don't think they were putting the cameras on him, no. I think they were avoiding at that point because he didn't get shown on the telecast. I mean, you could only see like the back of him or like when they were on the floor. But from that reaction, I don't remember there was so much else going on with Rollins on the ramp and Roman in the ring and Lesnar on the floor that I don't think they got a good shot of him. But I wish they did because I wish so many people could have saw that because, yeah, he was absolutely losing his mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Maybe they told Reigns that he was going over prior to this and he had smartened up his family. But to me, it never... Well, it never really made sense to me why he would go over because, the fans were just going to shit on it. But and you don't want to make Lesnar look weak after just, giving him that boatload of money, the new contract. So I don't know. Maybe he just got caught up in the moment and forgot, hey, this is a work, buddy,
Yeah, it was a tough spot for Roman to be in, and it's not his fault. That's the biggest thing. It's not his fault. The way they booked it, he should have been facing like Rusev at this WrestleMania and like beat Rusev and got that rub. And then next year, if you want to give him that title run, I think he'd be more ready. But he was injured, and then when he won the Superstar of the Year, when he was hurt for like 4 months and he barely wrestled singles matches, and then the Rumble shit. Obviously, I was there, and that was a crazy crowd, and I mean, it set the tone for kind of reactions for him to come. So it would have really maybe ruined him if he won the title that night, because the crowd would have hated it. I can't even imagine he got a negative reaction the next night at Raw, just because if he would have walked in with the title to that Raw, I can't even imagine how it would have been, and it would have followed him to every city.
Yeah, and I think you're right when you mentioned that injury. I thought that really held him back, and then when he came back, it was just like, all right, we hit pause and now we're going to hit play again, and you guys are just going to have to go along with it, and we're going to push this guy to the moon. And people weren't buying it. They, when he was injured, they listened to the promos, and they were obviously pre-recorded.
Yeah.
And they were still terrible. They had all day to redo them, and he was just a guy you'd look at and say, yeah, he's got potential, but it's not now.
Yeah, and especially like with those promos, like Roman has charisma and he can talk, but they're writing these promos for him. Somebody, whether it's Vince or whoever, there's somebody that's not in Roman's age range that is writing these promos that it just doesn't sound natural. And even when he gets out like in front of the crowd, he just sounds really uncomfortable. If you just let the man speak, give him a couple points, some bullet points to hit, and just let him run with it, like promos go so much smoother that way. And the best guys that did promos, that's how they operate. And when you're going out there and trying to memorize 20 lines and trying to, make sure you get to, talk about this, this future pay-per-view or, tonight what's happening on Raw, like just let these guys go out there and talk and be themselves, and people relate and connect with them more rather than going out there and sounding like a fucking robot.
Yeah, exactly. And, just to wrap up, how can people, that you got your Twitter, or do you have any other projects that you're doing, or?
Yeah, my Twitter is pretty simple. It's at Frank WWE Clown. I'm quite the active tweeter on there, but I'm doing work right now. I'm working on a documentary about wrestling fans. It's called Marks. It's Still Real to Me. And we actually did the first filming for it, footage this week at Mania. So that's something that I'm not directing or really. I'm just one of the people that's one of the, I wouldn't call it an actor, but one of the people that are, that they're focusing on. And it's going to be just basically a documentary about the world of wrestling fans, which is a crazy world that like something like this hasn't been done yet. And wrestling fans are like the most loyal, passionate, some of the most crazy, rabid, opinionated people in the world. So a project like this is going to really shine a light on that. And I've been doing some stuff. I worked for MTV this past week at WrestleMania, doing interviews and stuff. And so I'm hoping that's going to turn into something more. But yeah, like it's going back to what we started with. This clown thing, as ridiculous as it looks and sounds, has really opened up a lot of doors for me. And none of these opportunities would have came my way if not for that. So I'm just riding it while it's hot, and I'll ride it all the way until it burns out. So
yeah, that's what you got to do. And who are the other famous fans? I know I follow Brock Lesnar guy,
yeah.
And is there another guy who is the guy who went to like 40 straight pay-per-views?
Yeah, there's the Brock Lesnar guy, and then there's the guy, he went to 37 straight pay-per-views. His name is Jon. He goes by WWE's biggest fan on Twitter, which I'm not arguing with that title. He's one of my good friends, and he's a fucking maniac. 37 pay-per-views in a row, and a lot of those pay-per-views were really, really bad. So
yeah, your average Battlegrounds.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, the Battlegrounds, like those Bryan and Orton matches, where like none of them were a clean finish for like 3 pay-per-views in a row. He spent like. And he's sitting ringside at all those shows. So, I mean, he's dropping 300-400 on those, and you kind of feel bad. But then there's Sign Guy. He's been around forever. The red hats, blue shirt, holding up the signs always. So there's like this weird clique of fans that travel around, and we all just know each other from traveling, and it's kind of like this cool element to it. And I feel partially responsible for like all these other fans like trying to do the same thing, which is awesome. It's so cool. So now these WrestleManias and these events have turned into more than just the show. It's kind of like the week's events and like seeing everybody and getting to, you know, just kind of shoot the shit and, you know, just enjoy the week.
Sure. Yeah. That kind of sounds like the UFC scene. And you know, it's basically the same shit, except, you know, one's a work and the other's a shoot mostly. You know, not that there hasn't been some works in the UFC or MMA in general, but the crossover it's undeniable because, you know, I went to WrestleMania and I was sitting with Chael Sonnen, and everywhere the guy turned, Chael, and all the wrestling fans knew who he was, and you know, repeating his promos that he said 4 years ago to him.
Yeah.
And the crossover is undeniable, you know, so that's why I always, you know, when some of these MMA alleged purists start talking about how this is totally different than professional wrestling, I say, well, you just admitted that you really just don't get it.
Yep.
You don't understand why this is popular.
Yeah, and if they don't understand by now, they'll never understand. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, it's not even worth arguing with them anymore. Yeah. But hey, man, it was good talking wrestling with you. You have some really good insights. The definition of a smart mark. You know your shit. So let's stay in touch because I enjoyed the talk, and you know, follow him on Twitter, and talk to you guys later. Thanks.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Sonnen. Beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever again!
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo!
I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't.
Dressed up as a clown. And when I first saw this guy, I was like, man, what is this guy's gimmick? He just shows up as a clown. And but everybody knows him at WWE. He's like a celebrity that's a fan. The other fans come up to him and ask for pictures and stuff. So I got a hold of this guy. I missed him out in Mania last week. But what's going on, Frank?
Nothing much. I'm just there's always that Mania withdrawal week after you get home, and I sound kind of sick probably because of all the climate change and everything coming from California back to Chicago. But I'm hanging in there, so I'm doing well.
Yeah, we missed each other. Like I was saying, you know, I was out at Mania too, and I had an incredible time. You know, I was telling Jerry Briscoe at WWE, you know, I've been to all the big UFCs. I've seen many Pacquiao fight. I've seen Floyd Mayweather fight. And I've never been to...
Pay me nothing.
And I have my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni.
Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
They hate my guts. The only reason they haven't killed me is they don't want to underline, they don't want to highlight, they don't want to put an exclamation point behind all my work. Doing that would only build me up and only make my work stronger.
So I'm joined by Frank the Clown, the legendary superfan for the WWE. So if you've ever seen the guy in the front row on all the pay-per-views or TV, he's the guy literally.
Brock Lesnar's such a badass, and that I love that where the fans that really don't know anything about it, like really get involved in it and really get entertained by it, because really there's just not for somebody that's been to tons of WWE shows and tons of sporting events. WrestleMania just takes the cake by far.
This was my first WrestleMania to see at a stadium. And I had read, in some of the newsletters, like Brian Alvarez's newsletter or Dave Meltzer, that the sound was a little different. Like it almost sounded like the crowd was a little dead at times. And I've even heard like Triple H would say when he walked out, he would tell the younger guys, if it's silent, don't take it like they're not reacting. It takes a while for the noise to get to you. So to me, the stadium spectacle was pretty cool, but it was kind of quiet. I don't know if you noticed the difference between the stadium, an event quite like WrestleMania, at least in a stadium. When I was a real young guy, I went to WrestleMania 10 at Madison Square Garden, and it was great. But, looking out into a crowd of 75,000 people with all the pyros, and I mean, nobody puts on a better live show than WrestleMania.
No, absolutely. The thing is about WrestleMania, it's grown so much over the years. Like, I mean, even WrestleMania 22 that was my first WrestleMania. So I've been to 10 in a row now. That was in Chicago, and that was the last small stadium show they did with 20,000 people. And every year it truly does grow. And so many of like my casual fans, I wouldn't even call them that, like just so many of my friends that have no interest in wrestling text me and they're like, we're at WrestleMania tonight. We're at WrestleMania tonight. They don't know anything that's going on, really. But, I mean, they always text me after the show. And especially this one, they were like, holy shit, that was so awesome. Like, Ronda Rousey was on and, The Rock. And